Chase Whiteside is a documentary filmmaker and also founder of New Left Media. Here's a little bit of his latest video filmed at a bunch of Occupy protests across the country.
We were allowed to occupy for a while, and then they've decided that, well, you've had your, freedom of assembly and speech long enough. I think it's time for that to stop.
The police are part of the 99%. Yeah, they are, but not until they take off their badge, take off the uniform, and join us. Up until then, they are protecting the interests of the moneyed class, and that became crystal clear on the morning of the 25th.
All right, so Chase, of all the places you went to talking to Occupy protesters in all of the different locations, what stood out as, we hear about income disparity as kind of the #1 stated theme, but do you agree with that? What were you hearing most of?
Well, yeah, I think one of the criticisms that people keep talking about when they criticize the Occupy movement is that there's not a uniformity of problems. There's not a uniformity of solutions that they're calling for. But I think that makes some sense. I don't think that people have to understand the role of the Bush tax cuts in creating the deficit necessarily to understand that they're not getting a fair shake. And an example of this is people always tell us, like, if you don't want to flip burgers, you need to do good in school, work hard, go to college, get a degree, and then there'll be a good job waiting for you. And what's happening is people are doing all of those things. They're incurring a lot of student debt to do it, and there aren't jobs on the other end. So income inequality is a big one because people are seeing that even while the economy has been bottoming out beneath us, what we're finding is that the wealthiest few are still doing well. In fact, some of them are doing better than ever, while the rest of us have been doing worse. And so when you see Republicans call for tax cuts to those people who've been doing well in this economy and to also cut benefits for the people who have been hurt, I think that's in large part what this Occupy movement is in response to.
Yeah, and people are actually getting kind of tricked also when it comes to this very emotional issue of will I have a job or not. I mean, we just talked about earlier on the show, Mitt Romney recently telling a young lady, if I am elected the next president, there will be jobs for every college graduate when they finish school. If you reelect the president, there won't be. And the idea that any candidate would even say that, as if anyone could possibly believe it, is incredible. But part of that has to be that people are incredibly concerned about that. They're looking for someone to say anything to them that feels positive, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think the Republicans are going to have a really hard time saying we're both going to get everyone employed and give everyone a job, but also we're not going to have a renewed stimulus, or we're not going to use any sort of government incentive to create those jobs. I don't see how they're going to do it. This idea that you're going to continue to slash regulation and continue to cut taxes as the solution to creating jobs, I don't think that's going to happen. That said, I don't think that there are a lot of good, easy solutions for creating jobs. But one thing that's interesting is we spent some time covering the Tea Party movement. I'm sure you're aware. And there's such a contrast here between these two movements in terms of how they talk about problems. Both, I think, share some ideas. They feel like the bailouts were wrong. They feel like the people who are in large part responsible for the economic disaster have not been allowed to suffer the consequences of what they did. But the Tea Party blames the government. They look to the government as the problem for all of these things. And the Occupy movement blames the runaway influence of corporations on government, which is something different altogether. And so to the idea that we're going to slash regulations and let the corporations have more power than ever and go more unchecked than ever as a solution to creating jobs, I actually believe that that's going to be rhetorically a hard thing for Mitt Romney to run on.
When we first started talking about the Occupy movement, I was very, very skeptical. While I agreed with the long list of different issues that the protesters are out there as a result of, I was very skeptical that we would actually be able to see any kind of tangible change anywhere that we could point to. Fortunately, I was wrong. I mean, we've already seen Republicans like Eric Cantor bring up income disparity in a real way when talking to the press. His solution was not one I agreed with, but he brought it up in a way that wasn't laughable, at least. We saw banks, not only because of Occupy, but at least in part, eliminate those fees for ATM transactions, for example. We are seeing some changes, but my real question is how long can this go on? We're already starting to see kind of legal loopholes used to get people out of the occupied areas and not able to come back. What's the end game? And the end game may be longer than the next 6 months, but where is this going? Where can this go?
Yeah, I think that's a great and important question that needs to be asked. A lot of people still think the Occupy movement is about the camps, about the encampments. And I think those were an important part of getting started because they brought visibility. And it's incredible to think that in cities across the country, which is the case, that people were building these encampments. But what was going on there wasn't so much that all of these new issues were coming to the fore. You had all of these issues that had been there and different activist groups had been working on for a long time that suddenly were joined together under the Occupy banner. And so a lot of people who'd been activists working on, say, homelessness in different cities, or working on issues relating to foreclosures, issues relating to poverty. Those activists are all coming out and like sort of tagging along with the Occupy movement. So when the encampments go away, I don't think that the work that they're doing is going to go anywhere. But what has made the Occupy movement so special and so unique is that it's really changed the message, which is what you were saying, Eric Cantor coming and even him bringing up income inequality. And so I think now it's no longer about occupying parks, it's about occupying the news cycle, occupying the conversation, occupying the political discourse, to make sure that these issues are getting talked about and that these issues are getting covered. And so that's what I think this is going to become. Winter, obviously a lot of these places are very cold. They're not going to be able to withstand the winter and continue to keep physical occupations. But that doesn't mean that the movement and the message can't occupy different spaces. Well, and I don't want to just, a lot of people will say, it's going to occupy Twitter or Facebook, and I think that's a really limited way to look at it. We need to occupy the conversation wherever it takes place.
Last question for you is, of all the places you visited for this last video, what's the one most interesting moment or thing that kind of stands out in your mind? If somebody said, tell me the most compelling story, single story or incident.
To me, the most compelling story was Cincinnati, Ohio. Obviously the larger, more dramatic stories took place with the raid in Zuccotti Park or with a horrible police brutality in Oakland. But in Cincinnati, what I admire so much about what's going on there is they're saying, we don't need, this doesn't need to just be something that's far away. We can occupy right here at home. And so I found all of these people who are involved in Occupy Cincinnati who have been involved in one way or another in other activist issues before. Some of them have never been involved in anything before, but they so feel the need to get involved that they're out there in the cold, even if it's only 5 of them some days, and they're making a difference in some small way by letting people see that it's not just taking place on the coast, it's taking place in every city in this country.
All right, Chase Whiteside, documentary filmmaker, founder of New Left Media. Great job on the video, and we're going to keep an eye on this one. We'll have you back.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it.